Hello, everybody, and welcome to Today in Space, the podcast about all things space. And this week we have a quick episode, hopefully quick. I mean, that's saying something. If I say quick, it's really kind of a very general term. If you're familiar with the show, I can ramble on, I can kind of go off, but that's what we do here. That's the podcast. I am your host, Alex Girofanos. For anyone that's new, if you are new, please make sure to subscribe. That way you can get all additional episodes that come out. You can get alerts. One of the great things about on the podcast, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it actually gives you an alert when the podcast comes out, so you can go back, download it for later, maybe your drive to work, whatever it might be. On YouTube's the same deal. We premiere a lot of the episodes, so if you do want to watch them when they come out live, which is usually a few days after the audio podcast, you can do that. Obviously, that helps us grow, that helps us get in front of more people. And we've been really enjoying this new era of Today in Space, kind of from the 200 episode and on. You know, we've reached out to more people. We've had some more people on the podcast, and it's been a lot of fun. Like last week, we had the Weaver brothers, and we've had a slew of people on to share about their passions of science, whether it's science fiction, like last week with our filmmaker friends with the movie Cosmos, or maybe even if we go back, there's so many different episodes. The People of Science series has been, for me, a learning experience. It's been fun because I get to just get on an episode and talk to somebody, talk about why they're passionate about something, why they're doing something that they love. And I mean, that's why I'm here. That's because I love talking about space and sharing my thoughts on that. And thank goodness people are listening. So that's good. It's amazing that people will actually want to listen in. But that is because of people like you that have been listening, that have been sharing with other people. That's how this podcast grows. So I really do appreciate that. This week we're going to have some orbital news. We're going to tell you about, there's a slew of rocket launches coming up throughout this weekend and going into next week, so that's definitely something to look out. We'll talk about those briefly. We'll have links for all of those in this week's episode, so that if you want to go watch a specific launch, learn more about it, maybe sign up for an alert, that's all there. We're going to have that for you, just like we do on pretty much every episode. We're going to talk about the life on Venus. If you guys have probably heard of that, but it's fizzled down a little bit. Let's bring it back up. Let's talk about finding alien life, or just intelligent life, or any kind of sign of life elsewhere. It's a pretty amazing discovery. I'll share my thought on something there. And then, of course, we've got Starship Evolution going on. So we'll jump into it in a second. But quick, a little bit of business. Supporting this podcast is as simple as telling a friend who's about space, who's about science, even the slightest bit. I think the niche we found here is giving just enough technical information, but also keeping it a little bit big picture. So even if you're not a scientist, even if you're someone that's just generally interested, or even like a hobby, like, hey, I like space, but I don't know where to start. That's what we're here for. And that's where our niche has really seemed to be. So, and of course, actually talking to people. It's something that it's not necessarily a nerd skill per se, but we're bringing up a new era of communication nerds. Anyways, I hope you're well. Things are crazy. So this is also my escape, as I'm sure it's your escape from the actual reality outside our doors. But if you're going through some stuff, please know we're sending you all the love we can from here, from this little spaceship in the vast, infinite insanity that is the internet and, of course, the universe. So we wish you nothing but the best, and hope that you keep striving and moving forward and finding new ways to adapt to the world around us that's constantly changing. But we've got a lot of things that we can escape the world from a little bit here, and talk about the actual progress in space. One of the crazy things about the time that we're living in, and it seemed to align with other progress in space, is that the world around it, the society around, the Cold War is really where we go back to, right? The 60s and the late 50s, 60s into the 70s, and how tumultuous it was around, not only in the U.S., but around the world. Obviously, with the Cold War, we were pointing nukes at each other and threatening to press the button. And it was tough, as someone that grew up in the 90s with the Space Shuttle program. It's tough to understand that world. And now it's interesting to see that, once again, space is seeing a ton of progress in a time of chaos. And I'm not really quite sure what to think of it still. The one thing that I'm understanding a little bit more that's probably the same as it was back in the early space race is the regular world didn't really offer a lot of hope, a lot of, well, a good view of the future, let's be honest, right? And one thing that the space program does, and I think it did for a lot of people with NASA's return to human spaceflight, with DM2, with the Crew Dragon capsule, there were so many people that watched that launch and that have talked to me about it. And pretty much every guest that we've had on this podcast has mentioned that being one of the few moments that they've seen as good that's happened. And yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness we have some kind of progress, that the progress wasn't stifled due to political reasons. It was probably boosted for political reasons, but at least hopefully we'll reap the benefits of that as the private sector comes in and keeps developing, right? So we've got SpaceX, obviously. We've got Blue Origin that was about to do their test the day I'm recording this. This is Thursday, September 24th, and they scrubbed that launch. And that's one of the launches that's coming up here. So that is the New Shepard rocket, which is actually the first reusable rocket, right, to launch and land. It actually beat, I believe it was the SpaceX Falcon 9, but they're two totally different rockets, right? Suborbital and orbital class rockets. Suborbital being New Shepard, and orbital being the Falcon 9. So obviously the different things you can do with that, right? But that doesn't mean that just because it's a suborbital rocket that the New Shepard rocket doesn't do good for space, right? I mean, it's flown over 100 different payloads to orbit across 10 flights. So about 10 payloads per launch. It looks like they've got 12 payloads on this NS-13 launch. It's going to be launching from Texas. It was scrubbed. We've got a reason for the scrub. I'm going to pull that up right now, actually, so we can discuss that a little bit. But we have not gotten a date yet on when this will happen. But they detected a potential issue with the power supply to the experiments, which obviously is the whole reason they're launching these things. So if the experiments don't have any power, there's no reason for the risk to actually launch that, or for the people paying for this ride to space to go with that. So they've scrubbed it. We'll hear more from them. The one thing about Blue Origin is they're kind of the exact opposite in their approach than SpaceX. SpaceX is go, 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 test as you go, fail as fast and hard as you can, as fast as possible, where Blue Origin literally, as some people have tried to troll me on the internet, who are Blue Origin hardcores, is that they love taking the slow approach. They have the tortoise, of course, from this old story, Tortoise and the Hare, about taking their time and progressing. It's a different balance, right? It's a different balance that they have to put together. My point here being is when Blue Origin launches and when they're about very close to launching, that's when you hear the next thing about them. Until then, you don't really hear anything. The one great thing about SpaceX is they're very open in comparison to the rest of the industry about what they're doing and where they're going. And even with the Starship Evolution that we're seeing in Boca Chica, Texas, they're allowing people that are like NASA spaceflight, and which I really do love what they're doing over there, and a little jealous that they're able to get these views all the time. But I'm just glad that there are people like that out there doing that, taking a camera, watching the progress that's happening of this new developmental spacecraft that's being built, and we're watching the steps. We're watching them adapt each version and see the things live, and it gets us guessing, it gets us excited. That's the thing I like about the balance with SpaceX that I wish I got a little bit more with Blue Origin, And one of the cool things that they're doing with this launch, this NS-13, is they're going to be testing a key technology for NASA for returning to the moon. So we talked about this before. NASA selected 3 different companies to be used to basically create their bid for sending us back to the moon and moon landing technology. So SpaceX was given some money. Blue Origin is on the national team, which is a conglomerate of kind of the big players in the space program. They all kind of team together to get their pieces of the different technologies together and to have some camaraderie, build a team together. And I think that's great. So they're part of the national team effort. And what they're trying to do is create this way of landing on the moon that's going to be repeatable within, I think, what did they say? 100? Let me see here. 100 within 100 meters of the destination point. So basically going to the moon, saying, we're going to land here, and being within 100 meters. And that might seem like that's a pretty wide tolerance, but when you consider that just the insanity of actually landing and where you're going to actually land. I mean, even the original moon landings, they had to plot out not only the place they thought they were going to be, but any kind of chance that the mission went wrong, right? Maybe you came in too fast. Maybe there was something different about the predicted orbit that you were going to the moon, and you ended up either too slow or too fast. You don't have enough fuel to make the landing and make adjustments, so you've got to know where else you're going to go. You got to do a lot of planning. So this technology is going to allow them to use different things. I'm going to pull up this picture, and we'll have it in the video here on YouTube, but they're using 4 different things here. So they're using the ring fin, the descent and landing computer, navigation Doppler, LiDAR, and terrain relative navigation. So basically getting us closer to the point where we are with airplanes, where commercial aircraft or even just private aircraft, where we're able to have sensors on board to do these things repeatably. That if we're going to go to the moon and we're going to build an economy around space travel, this stuff has to be consistent. So to make a long orbital news segment shorter, that's ultimately what this technology and the big picture of where we're going with this. It's about making this reliable and repeatable so that the trust can come in. Hey, if I do send something to space, I'm relying on this technology, and it's almost like it's a no-brainer. Like a lot of the reason why we're able to have so many airplane trips across the country, around the world, is because they got to that point. So that's where they're heading. And again, we don't know when that launch is going to happen, so we'll keep you guys updated on that. Blue Origin attempted to launch their NS-13 mission again on Friday the 25th, but it was also scrubbed again, so we're still waiting to hear when that launch will happen. But wish them luck. On Saturday, we've got the ULA Delta IV Heavy launching from Florida, from Cape Canaveral. That is that super secret mission that got scrubbed and didn't launch in time, so not much known about the payload on board. Guaranteed there will be people that are pointing their telescopes, tracking the actual information as it goes in to see what orbit it's going into, which can let them know what that is. There are so many eyes on... I was actually listening... I was both reading an article about this, because a lot of the stuff that's happening with the Space Force now, this transition from the Air Force to the Space Force, there's an acknowledgement that there are people looking at everything that's going in orbit. Even some of the early spy satellites from back in the Cold War days, and even the new satellites that go up there, there's so many people watching that it's so difficult for them to keep anything a secret anymore, because as soon as you know what the orbit is, and there are people in the Air Force and the Space Force that are tracking this stuff. Once you know that orbit, you know the intent more or less of what that is. You understand why they're doing that, and there's some very complex, and it's something I would love to have. If you know anybody who's involved in that, who can talk about that and would love to come on and talk about that, please send them our way. We'd love to have them on so we can learn more about this, because there's this whole field of people that will just look at orbital data and they'll know, like at an instant, like, oh, okay, that's what that is doing. It's wild. There's so much, and not a lot of it can be hidden anymore. So that's pretty cool stuff. Next up, so again, ULA Delta IV Heavy launch. I love watching the Delta IV Heavy launch. That's a very cool rocket. 3 boosters, lots of power and energy put behind that payload. Be very fascinating to watch. Obviously, big shout out to Tori Bruno. Good luck to you and your team for getting that done. And on Sunday, September 27th, we got the SpaceX Falcon 9 B1058.3, so that's its 3rd flight. It's been recovered twice, and Starlink 12 will be launching for that. So we're going to have another batch of Starlink satellites going up. It's been interesting to talk to a lot of people, especially on the People of Science segments, where we're getting their opinion on Starlink. I know there's a lot of folks that I talk to online that are split between, this is a great thing, it's so exciting, it's bringing more people into space, and then there's the argument that's not you can't ignore that it is affecting amateur astronomy. The question is how much, but still it is affecting it, which is then affecting that moment definitely in children's lives where they're able to get a telescope. Or I know my early childhood in elementary school, we had our science teachers and definitely one of my science teachers, Mr. Haffey, would bring out this big telescope, and we'd be able to see things like the rings of Saturn, and you'd be like, oh my god, like you'd think it was a sticker on the other side of the lens, and it opens up our minds to so much, and there's so much light pollution, and we're so disconnected from the night sky that there's definitely an argument that having more of these satellites on orbit that are creating these huge streaks on the images that astronomers are trying to take, even amateur astronomers, which means the only way we're not going to get those lines, if nothing changes, is to only be able to do astronomy from space, outside of the atmosphere, just like the Hubble Space Telescope. And obviously that takes the ability away from people that obviously don't have billions of dollars to fund something like that. So that is unfortunately what it is. And then Tuesday, we've got a double launch Tuesday, folks. First up on that double Tuesday launch on September 29th is the U.S. Space Force launch with a Falcon 9 B1062.1. So it's the first flight for that Block 5, that specific booster. It's going to be the GPS 304 satellite, adding another to the constellation, enabling more abilities for GPS to be able to be applied around the globe for more reliability, for our GPSs to be better. So that's exciting. That's the first one there. That's going to be launching and being recovered by Just Read the Instructions, the drone ship that'll be out in the middle of the Atlantic to pick up that Falcon 9 after it comes back down after delivering payload into orbit. Obviously, the first thing we want to do is get the payload into orbit. Second is to recover that rocket and save the millions of dollars. The hilarious thing I heard Elon Musk say the other day was his comparison that he, I guess, uses with his team in the early days about, you've got this, what did he call it, a pallet of cash that's streaking through the atmosphere and bleeding money as it comes down. You would want to save that cash because otherwise you're just wasting it. That's literally what we've done all the time before that. So it's hilarious just to see how the things that you got to do to explain new concepts and new ideas. That's just hilarious. But it's also true. It's also literally like a pallet of cash. So that's on that first launch on Tuesday. Look out for that we're looking at, 4 days to 10 hours. So Tuesday at around 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. 9:55 p.m. Oh, I was wrong about that. It's 9:55 p.m. September 29th. That's the night launch on that day. But double launch, and then Northrop Grumman is launching their Antares rocket from Virginia as well. So you've got two launches to look out for. We'll have links if you want to learn more about those. But super exciting. 4 launches in the next probably week. And that's it for orbital news. Well, to move on to the next segment, really, it's the life on Venus. You guys may have heard about this. I'm going to pull up this link here. So there's a great link from Scientific American that not only goes over the team that was involved, but also Jane Greaves, the radio astronomer at the Cardiff University in Wales, that she was involved in this whole observation of Venus. And it's a really cool story. I'm not going to go into it here because the writing is really well done. I'd rather point you to the person that did the hard work to get that done. But we're looking at potential life being found on Mars through the evidence of a gas that shouldn't be there in any other. It shouldn't be there because this phosphine gas, the way from what we know, and this is science, right? We base everything off of what we know from before, and we build on top of it. The existence of a phosphine gas means to us, from what we know, that something is creating that gas. We have that because we have technology that's doing that. The only other thing that we know that could do that is life, and since we don't think there's technology on the surface of Venus, it means that there's a very high likelihood that there is life airborne and not life like you and I, but some life form that is creating this phosphine gas, whether it's like, us where we release carbon dioxide gas, this could be something else. So this little marker that they found by looking at the elements that come out when you look at the atmosphere of another planet or a star, it is showing that evidence. I think most of us, when we think of life, we kind of think of that example, that primordial soup, right? That was kind of how it was taught to me, of how Earth began, and this primordial soup finally had the ingredients for life, and that's where things started to come to life. And now, who knows what could happen? I mean, there's another article about this topic that's saying that there's a potential that there's an asteroid. For Earth, one of the things that's been tossed around is either on a comet or an asteroid. There was a life form that was on that asteroid. Comet hit Earth in its early stages, and then that grew to the life that we have today, to the diversity that we have. That goes against kind of the primordial soup thing, but where did it come from, right? Did it just come out of nowhere, or was it brought here? So now this life being in the atmosphere brings up another question, that now it could have just been that there could have just been a comet or an asteroid that was flying by and picked up as it was skimming, let's just say Venus, right? It skimmed Venus, picked up some of these life forms as it was going by and kept going, and then that life survived and made it to Earth or somewhere else. And so we're learning all these different ways that life can travel and be placed different places around the universe, and it's super exciting. And I'm going to be hopefully reaching out soon to some of these people here to see if we can get them on, the actual scientists and engineers on board that helped make this discovery possible. And then hopefully we'll have some missions that will come from this soon, so we can actually look for life on Venus. But I'm definitely interested to know what you guys think. Has this changed your thoughts on finding alien life? Has this changed your whole idea of whether we really are alone, or even what alien life looks like? I would love to know. So please feel free to reach out to us. Today in Space Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Today in Space on TikTok. Today in Space Podcast at gmail.com. And of course, our website, todayinspace.net. You can reach out to us in all those different places. And finally, this week, we've got the Starship Evolution in Boca Chica. It's been very, very cool to see Starship grow from the very early Starhopper. We've got our 3D printed model here of Starhopper as a memento to the early days of the testing of Starship. And then we, of course, had this early prototype that we also 3D printed of the Starship. And it's very interesting because with the idea that they've given us, this Starship spacecraft that will eventually be this new mode of travel that could bring up to 100 human beings from one place to another, to basically bring an entire colony to Mars in one go. And even, as Robert Zubrin's been discussing, these spaceships, starships, that's probably why they named it, that can be your colony. You wouldn't have to bring this whole infrastructure. Have the Starship be the place where people live and breathe and eat and do all the other things that humans need to do. You can have it all in this one thing, which could rapidly increase the speed at which that we could colonize and go through space and all of that. I think that's a very, very fascinating thing. But back to my original point, because we do rant here on the podcast. The Starship has changed shape over time, right? We used to have these three fins on the bottom here. We had obviously the nested Raptor engines down here, and then we had this kind of dual fin thing up top. That has kind of changed, and now we're seeing, this was all originally kind of an idea, like a early stage thing, and we're seeing it develop. Now we're seeing this big corn silo, basically grain silo. That's what we saw with SN6, where it went up and came back down, did its short hop, 150 meter hop, and now we're looking forward to the 2 kilometer hop. In preparation of that, they did a pressure test of SN7, which is the 7th iteration of Starship, and they let that pop because they were bringing up the pressure of the fuel inside to a certain level to see if they can get repeatability. And that safety pressure that they were using was much higher than they would operate potentially. So basically, it failed when they knew it was going to fail. And that's the cool thing about the way SpaceX is doing things. They've got all these different starships that they're able to just kind of like, okay, we're going to blow up this one. We're going to try and use this one. We're going to learn as much as we can from this one. And thanks to NASA Spaceflight and Boca Chica girl and there's so many different people that are, I mean, Padre, like there's so many people that are involved in watching this development. So I'm only going to be kind of an observer, a big picture look at what's going on. They're doing a fantastic job of diving into the details and showing you live views of what it's like down there. So again, I would love just to spend a day just watching them work on that stuff. That would be so cool. So they have a really, really cool job. But SN7 popped. Now we're seeing the actual fins on board the next Starship SN8. Looking forward to that 2-kilometer hop soon. We don't know when that's going to happen. But as soon as Elon Musk tweets about it, we'll find out. And we'll be tweeting that. So if you want to follow us, Today in Space Pod, or my personal page at El Greco, that's ELGR, the number 3 CO. That's usually what I'm doing. I'm tweeting space stuff. Anything that new that comes up, that's what I'm doing there. And of course, saying hi, trying to spread a little bit of positivity on Twitter. But I don't spend a lot of time on Twitter. Short bursts, staying away from that dumpster fire. But it's pretty interesting what's going to happen next. We may see a nose cone. I was watching a little bit of the live stream from NASA Spaceflight today. Again, this is Thursday the 24th, so a lot to come. But that's pretty much it. I promised I'd keep this short this week. It's under 30 minutes. That's short for me. So I hope you're doing well. There are some Netflix documentaries that's been recommended to me that I've had on my list that now that they've been recommended, which Rachel, thank you for that. Ray, I appreciate that. So there's Away, which is that new series on Netflix. Apparently that's very, very good. I'm going to be getting into that soon. And then there's the Space Shuttle documentary that's on there that goes through apparently a lot of the detail and kind of the things we all forget about if you know we weren't there live, we weren't living through it, and even those that did live through it, you may have forgotten. There's a lot of color that they've added to that situation. It's a pretty serious, knowing what happened to that crew. I've kind of avoided it a little bit. There's just been too much insanity in my life, and I'm sure everyone else's life. But I am looking forward to watching that because it's a short. I guess they're not putting that out for very long, so at least on Netflix. So I do want to get it before it leaves. But I highly recommend that to you guys. And of course, like our guests made on our last episode, their film Cosmos, which is available on many different platforms. But that's a great movie. If you're just looking for a solid movie for people of all ages, especially if you've got family and kids, it's a great movie to get them excited about the possibilities and to see some struggle and people work together. And to see scientists and the ability that people that know science and that can operate equipment and that can do it themselves. We're big fans of that here. So that's something we highly recommend. Again, a great episode. Go back and listen to that if you haven't. Other than that, that's pretty much it. If you want to check out some stuff we're doing, we've got our 3D printing lab, AG3D, that we are constantly sharing different things we're working on. And you also learn about 3D printing in the process. So that's at AG3D Printing on Instagram. And we also have our Etsy shop, ag3dprinting.etsy.com. We actually have products. We actually make stuff with our 3D printers, and we print them on demand. So that stuff, that profit goes back into the podcast so that we can do more things. We can 3D print fun models to showcase on the podcast. And we also 3D print stuff for our customers if they are in need of 3D printing services, engineering services, design services. We're doing all that. And then we're also selling these products. So one of the things that I love is one of my first products is the iPhone stand. It's kind of a homage to the Starship and the Space Shuttle, and it fits my phone really, really well. I love using this thing. I have a few around the house. And then we've also been pimping out board games. We've got our Harry Potter series. If you play the Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle board game, again, if you don't know, we're a bunch of nerds here, so we play games. Welcome to the party. We've been making a lot of stuff that's been helpful to me, that's made the game a little bit better, and it's been doing great on there. So great gifts if you got nerd friends, if you got just friends in general, you want to get them something cool. Everything is budget friendly, something in that price range you would get for a friend, especially with the holidays coming up. I don't know how things are going to work, but if you're looking for something fun and you want to help support the podcast and our efforts here of spreading love and spreading science, that's where to go. We appreciate you. We'll have more coming in the future here. We hope we've given you just a little bit of escape from the insanity of the world. This is Today in Space, your All Things Space podcast. Love you. Stay well. Make sure to let us know any of your thoughts on things like life on Venus, the Starship Evolution, or anything else that you're excited about. We'd love to talk about it here and hear from you. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time on Today in Space. See you later.